Hello and welcome back to the channel. Today's episode is going to be episode 4 in our Introduction to Pygame tutorial series on this channel. We will be picking up right from where we left off at the end of episode 3, so if you haven't been following along, make sure you check those out before diving in here, unless you're just here to kind of see the concepts we cover in this video, in which case that's totally fine. So previously we built a game that is just this fancy ball bouncing off the walls, and we created a score text that increments every time it hits a wall. So today's video we're going to be creating a player and handling player motion. So I've decided that we are going to make the player an orange rectangle, and we're going to let it move in all 4 directions based on the arrow keys. So we will be taking a look at how to do that today. First, I'm going to go ahead and create the color orange. Like I always do, I prefer my colors defined above as RGBs so that when I reference them later, I can just type in the color name. One less thing to think about. And we're going to have a section here where we create player variables. So we're going to create a variable for the width of the player. We'll say the rectangle will be around 30, and then we'll say height of 50 should be good. And then we will call out, again, these are some variables which once you have an object in mind, you are always going to need a width and a height, and then especially for rectangles or images or even circles, like you're going to need coordinates for it to start with. So for player X, we'll say start in the middle of the screen, but then we don't want starting too close to the circle because eventually the goal will be avoid the circle. So we'll say 500, which is going to be pretty close to the bottom of the screen because the coordinate grid in Pygame actually starts at the top left. So the bottom of the screen is 600 and the far right side of the screen is 600 for X and Y. So that's X and Y, and then because we're going to be moving the player like before, like the ball, we're going to make a player X and player Y direction. And we'll start those out as zeros so the player doesn't start moving initially. And then just to show something different, I know with the circle X and circle Y direction we combine speed and direction into one variable, but for the player I'm going to create another variable called speed, and a little bit later we'll see how to use that, and it's just kind of giving you guys 2 options for ways to move stuff. But let's go ahead and draw the player next. So we're gonna go down, and let's say underneath where we draw our circle, let's do pygame.draw. And this will be rect, and then it needs surface just like before. Pygame.rect, put it onto the screen, and then we will make it orange, which we have defined now. And then rectangles need 4 arguments here. They need X and Y starting coordinates, so we called that player X, player Y. And then it needs width and height, and we called those player width and player height. And if we wanted to, we could give it a thickness like we did with the ball so that it would just have a line edge, but if we do it this way, it should just be a solid orange rectangle, and that should look pretty good. So let's go ahead and see if we've successfully drawn. Yep, so there's our player. It doesn't do anything if I click the arrow keys right now, and it doesn't do anything when it collides with the ball, but we've drawn our rectangle onto the screen successfully. So let's go ahead and handle inputs from the player. So when the event is keys. So instead of the if event type being quit, which is how we exit the loop, we want if event type is equal to pygame dot and it is key down. And so when the key down is pressed, we're going to check what actual key it was. So event dot key, and let's say first if it was pygame dot key, the left key, then what we actually want to do is say the player X direction is going to equal -1. So that's moving to the left in the coordinate grid system. And we'll go ahead and copy those 2 lines of code down 4 times. And we'll say left, right, up, down. So left, right, and then up and down. So those are our arrow keys. I'm just picking those because I prefer to control it. A game like this, it certainly would be pretty common to do that with WASD as well. So, that's kind of up to you. This is just how I'm doing it for this video. And then, so when we go right, the player X direction will be 1. When we go up, we're actually going to subtract 1 from the player Y direction. Yeah, because 0 is at the top of the screen. And then when we go down, we want +1 for the player motion. Okay, and then the other thing we need to handle here is we need to handle when you release a key, stop the motion. So if the key up, pygame.key down, pretty much the opposite of this, then we check all these keys, and if it's left or right, we are going to stop the X direction, and if it's up or down, we're going to stop the Y direction. And so for all of these, we are going to be saying, well, while I have the left key held down, I want the player to move to the left. While I have the right key held down, player move to the right, up, down, move up or down. But then when I let go of the key, stop moving. If you don't include this key up stuff, it's going to keep sliding in whatever direction you last pressed until you press another direction. You could build a game that way, like a lot of times in ice dynamic, where like you stop moving but you're on a slick surface. That'll involve a continued motion, kind of like that. But for us, this is how we're going to do it, and we are going to now create another function just like we did with the ball, and we'll call it update player position. And let's go up to where we created the ball logic, and we'll create some player logic as well. So we'll say def update player position. Okay, pretty sweet. And we're going to have some globals for this guy as well. We're going to bring in global. We're going to bring in the player X. We'll do global. We'll do global for player Y. And this is just so I don't have to pass all these parameters in. You could pass them in as function arguments, and then you could return their results as function results. But if you reference everything globally, then you get to control directly based off of outside variables inside a function, and that is how I prefer doing this. So player X, player Y, X direction and Y direction should be all we need for now. And we're actually going to set up some code pretty similar to what we have down in the circle checker, with the difference being we're not really going to increment the score for anything, but we are going to check if the player X direction is positive. Then we are going to check and see if the player X is less than, but this isn't going to be 570 anymore, it's going to be 600 minus the player width. So because now we can adjust the size of that rectangle, and this will still hold true. That's saying the right edge of the screen minus however wide our actual rectangle is, so you can't go off the screen. And when that's true, then we are going to update the player X by the player X direction, but then multiplied by the player speed. So you remember above we defined player speed. We are going to multiply the direction by the speed, and that's how we're actually going to adjust the speed. So this is useful if you have a player that like you grab an upgrade and you immediately are twice as fast. This way you can just modify that speed variable and you don't have to worry too much about doing any math or checking what the current value was. Okay, so let's go ahead and do this a couple more times. We're going to do it for checking the player going to the left. And so we'll say if the player X direction is negative, then we want to check that the player X is just greater than 0, because the position of the rectangle is based on the lower left corner. So if it's greater than 0, that just means the whole rectangle is going to be on the screen. And we will, again, this part stays exactly the same because left or right is going to be handled by whether the direction is positive or negative. And we can pretty much copy this code exactly for the Y direction. So if player Y direction is positive, and then if the player Y is less than 600 minus the height, player Y direction, player speed, and again, greater than 0, player Y direction, player speed. So that pretty much should do it for movement. So let's go ahead and see if we've captured it all here. I'm going to press the left arrow key and I hold it down to slide to the left, slide to the right. That's pretty sharp. When I let go of the key, it stops moving. I can move up or down. Let's go ahead and check it up against a wall. Yep, perfect. We get stopped at the top, stopped at the right. We can do both at the same time. Stopped at the left, stopped at the bottom. There you go. So that's pretty cool right there. Just a few lines of code and we've created 4-directional player movement. Now you will notice if the rectangle slams into the circle right now, we don't have any game over condition. We can keep moving, the score keeps incrementing. So we've created movement, we haven't handled collision yet. But that's all for this tutorial. Hopefully you found it useful. If you have any questions about what you saw here or would like to see anything in particular in the future, just let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, if you found this or anything else on the channel helpful, I'd really appreciate a like and subscribe. It helps the channel out a lot. And as always, good luck with your code and thanks for checking out the channel. Thanks. Bye.